Well, we've heard the Tennessee side of things. Let's hear the Oklahoma side of things. That is John Williams, the Locked On Sooners host, not the famous composer, joining me here on the show. He's probably tired of me making that joke because I make it every single time that I have him on. But I just love John Williams too much to not point that out. So let's talk football here, John, because Tennessee is wildly impressive. I don't know how much better they can look through the first three football games. They have catapulted up the rankings, deservedly so. They blew out NC State. They've scored at least 50 points in every game. How much hope do you have that the Sooners can pull this one out?
Hey, I've got hope. This is going to be a home game for Oklahoma. They've got a really, really good defense. They've got an offense that's getting better week by week. They're a team that's getting healthier, most importantly, week by week, especially up front along the offensive line. As much as we want to talk about, hey, this is Oklahoma's first SEC game. This is Jackson Arnold's first game against an SEC opponent as a starter. It's Nico Iamaleava's first game against an SEC opponent as a starter. No disrespect to NC State, but this is going to be the best defense that he's faced since the bowl game against Iowa last year, where Josh Heupel, smartly so, took the ball out of his hands and didn't ask him to do a whole lot because the offense didn't have to do a whole lot in that game. And this is more than just Nico. The Tennessee Volunteers have a great running game led by Dylan Sampson. That unit is so good. They're doing a really, really nice job at making the game easy for Nico. But this is, again, the best run defense that Tennessee will have faced this year. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge for the Vols. They're a good team. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're not a good team, but they're going to be facing challenges from the Oklahoma Sooners as well, who have a defense that has a chance to be one of the better units in the country this year.
When you look at this Tennessee offense, it's explosive, but they do want to run the football, I think, more than people might realize. This has been kind of a narrative with Josh Heupel teams over the last couple of years. You think of all the passing and Hendon Hooker when things really got going. They beat Alabama a couple of years ago, but they have wanted to play balanced, complementary football and not ask Nico to throw it 45 times and go for 350 to 400 yards and 5 touchdowns in order to move it. What do you think this Oklahoma defense brings to the table that is going to make the rushing attack tougher?
Oklahoma's defensive tackle rotation right now is really, really good. They got the Dominic Williams addition in the transfer portal during the spring window, and he's been an impactful player. He's playing a lot of the three technique defensive tackle. You got a true freshman in Jaden Jackson, who everybody in the country wanted, and Oklahoma landed him. He's emerged, and he's become a starter for this team, and that's only happened one other time in the last 25 years, and that guy was Tommy Harris back in the early 2000s. So that goes to show just how good Jaden Jackson has been, and he's been really good in Oklahoma's first 3 games. But beyond that, Grayson Halton is having a really strong year. So the defensive tackle group is playing really, really good football, but the linebacker level is playing great as well, led by Danny Stutzman, an all SEC preseason selection, an All-American from last year. This is a really good team defense. And even when the first guy's not getting to the ball carrier, you're seeing several guys coming up and cleaning things up for Oklahoma. And that's what's been so key to them being successful. Houston's tried to run a lot of misdirection. Tulane came in with a really good offense, with a really good rushing attack led by Mekhi Hughes, and Oklahoma was able to shut it down. So this is a unit that is defending the run really, really well. And if they're able to do that against Dylan Sampson and the Tennessee Volunteers rushing attack, it'll help put them in better situations to be able to defend, again, an explosive Josh Heupel offense led by Nico.
Last week, the Oklahoma offense was, shall we say, unimpressive against Houston. It was not putting up the sorts of numbers. I think the defense was not perfect. There was a blown coverage, but the defense was mostly fine, and I think that's the good news if you're Oklahoma in this game. But I'm thinking of the offensive performance against Houston. Wasn't that impressive, was better against Tulane last week. Mm-hmm. When you look at this Oklahoma offense and what Jackson Arnold has brought to the table, can they win a shootout with Tennessee? Can they go toe-to-toe, blow for blow with what the Vols could do? Like, if this game gets to the point where both teams are in the 30s, do you think Jackson Arnold and Deion Burks and the rest of those Oklahoma weapons can keep up in that sort of game?
What gives me a little bit of optimism that they might be able to do that this week is they're probably most likely getting Nick Anderson back. This is a guy that had 798 yards receiving last year, 10 touchdowns, was really, really good in a breakout role, is a 6'4" dude. He can run a full route tree. He can win deep, average more than 20 yards per reception last year. You're getting him back, first opportunity that we'll get to see him this year. That's going to take a lot of the pressure off of Deion Burks, who has been really good in his slot wide receiver role, but you haven't been able to stretch the field with him just yet because teams know that's really your only threat in the passing game. So you get Nick back. You're probably getting at least one of your starters back along the offensive line, in particular center Branson Hickman, who came over again in the spring transfer portal window from SMU. That's been a big issue for the Oklahoma Sooners right now, is the offensive line instability that they've had due to injuries. You add a guy like Hickman back to the offensive front, and that's going to give you somebody with a lot of experience who's played 4 years of college football, and it's going to give you a little bit better chance to have a little bit more continuity along the offensive line, better communication, and hopefully be able to sustain drives. Now, if you're asking me, I don't like the idea of Oklahoma having to win in a shootout. I think if Oklahoma's going to win this game, they got to keep it low scoring. But they've shown that they're willing to play some ball control offense. They're not necessarily playing the Jeff Lebby up-tempo type of offense. They're playing more complementary, allowing their defense to be successful as opposed to running a lot of these 15-second 3-and-outs that we saw under Jeff Lebby the last couple of years. But because of the guys that they're getting back, I think they have a greater chance of getting into the 30s, running into high 30s and early 40s than maybe they would have 2 weeks ago. But again, it's got to be a defensive game. It's got to be a run game for Oklahoma, I think, to have a better chance to win this one.
Coming into the season, I think on paper, one of the most interesting components of this matchup is that Tennessee defensive line against the brand new Oklahoma offensive line. Getting Hickman back is certainly big, but you got James Pierce on the other side, and boy, you better be able to block him or he's going to cause havoc for a young quarterback. What's your confidence level the Oklahoma offensive line can at the very least hold serve against the Vols D front?
It's going to be a tough matchup. I mean, that's going to be where it's won and lost, because when Jackson Arnold has to pass, they're going to have to provide some protection. Now, Seth Luttrell's done a good job, the offensive coordinator, of scheming things up to get the ball out of his hands quickly. But teams are kind of adjusting to that and starting to get their hands up a little bit more and try to take that away. So if they want to neutralize James Pierce, they need to get the ball out of his hands quickly and run some of that quick action game. But I think it's going to be a tough matchup. Probably you're looking at an offensive tackle duo of Michael Tarkin, who played at USC in Florida in years past, playing on the right side, Jacob Sexton, who a lot of people like and think potentially he has a chance to be a future first rounder, playing left tackle for you. So you've got really good experience. You got a really talented dude on the other side, but it's a tough matchup, man. He's a top 5, NFL draft pick in the 2025 draft, and it doesn't matter who you have lining up at right tackle or left tackle. That's always going to make for a really difficult matchup. It's going to be fun to watch if you're just a college football fan and you're excited to see what James Pierce can put on tape. But for Oklahoma, a lot of it's going to be, hey, we got to be able to run the ball. We got to keep Jackson Arnold out of these, second and long, third and long situations, because that's going to be what really keeps the pressure off of your young quarterback and off this offensive line.
I think Oklahoma fans have to mentally be relying on the beauty of college football. It's the most unpredictable game in the world. When you have big favorites in college football, they can lose the game outright all the time. In the NFL, it doesn't happen. How often do you see 11, 12, 13-point favorites win? Now, this line is Tennessee minus 7.5 last that I had checked, which is certainly more than Oklahoma fans would probably
like. When you're on the road, I mean, that's basically 10.5 points.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that for Oklahoma, the craziness that you're having to rely on is through 3 games, there's no question Tennessee has been more impressive. They have played every game at their absolute best. I know 2 of their opponents have not been worthwhile, Chattanooga and Kent State, but they played NC State, a team that had legitimate ACC dark horse title aspirations this year, and it was competitive for about 1.8 quarters. And then Tennessee turned on the Jets. The defense came alive. The offense got things rolling. And suddenly that wasn't a close football game. So let's wrap up with your prediction here, John. I gave mine earlier in today's show. I've got the Vols going into Norman. I thought they'd win this game before the season, but I struggle picking against Tennessee with what I've seen from them so far, particularly how they bring the energy on the defensive side of the ball. I have Vols 34, Sooners 23. Your prediction is...
Yeah, I feel good about Oklahoma, man. I know this is going to get me crushed, and people are going to think I'm crazy and just a homer. And I get that. I get it, but I'm going to rely on a defense that's really good, And I think they're going to be able to do enough against the Tennessee run game to keep them off schedule and put Nico in some longer down and distances that he may or may not be quite comfortable with. Again, first big time road start for him, true road start. How's he going to respond? So give me Oklahoma 23-20. It's going to be a close game, but I think Oklahoma comes out on top.
I think if anybody gets to 30 points, Oklahoma goes down. And I agree with your prediction in that if both teams are under 30, that favors Oklahoma. But once you get the score rolling up, I think that's right where Tennessee wants to be. John Williams, Locked On Sooners. John, appreciate the time as always.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.